Hello and welcome to Rolling in Mills, film show where I talk about films. The film today is Beyond the Black Rainbow by a guy called Panos Cosmatos. He directed it and wrote it, and I gotta say that's a great name. Shit film though. Abysmal, I'd say. Fucking terrible. And the real sad thing about this is that it has a bunch of really, really neat stuff in it. Visually, this film is fantastic. In parts. Fantastic. Brilliant. Amazing cinematography. Really interesting visuals. Great soundtrack at parts, but it's nothing. It's essentially incoherent. Normally I like to give like a really short synopsis before I go into a video because, if someone hasn't seen a film, then, they might want to know a little bit about it, or if they haven't seen it in a while. But this is like, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, it essentially, it doesn't have a plot. And I'm not talking about it doesn't have a plot in an interesting way, like 2001: A Space Odyssey. I'm going to be referencing 2001 a lot because it's a good example of how to do really interesting visuals, really great soundtrack, really great editing, really great on a technical level, but then also fulfilling that for a purpose in a storytelling sense, but without a lot of dialogue and without a really, strong, cohesive plot. 2001 is very, very loose and very open and very thematic and broad, and also not very literal. And that's kind of the same with this, except it's like 2001 if it was made by a bunch of retards, essentially. That's pretty much the vibe I get from this film. So essentially, the film was about a girl who's in some sort of experimental science laboratory. There's a guy called Mercurio who's testing her. It's meant to be some sort of like 80s-esque program that will make your life better or something. It's got a great 80s aesthetic, this whole film does. It's got a kind of like vaporwavy, weird, retro vibe to it, which I normally like. It's just that it's really, really overdone in this, and it gets irritating very, very quickly. But that's essentially the premise, and nothing really happens in the film for about an hour and a half, and then the last 15 minutes turn into a slasher film out of nowhere. It's really bizarre, and bizarre in a storytelling sense. The rest of the film is weird, but it's just weird, and it's not weird for the purpose of anything. And when you just kind of have weirdness generally for an hour and a half, and you have no interesting characters, you have no interesting plot, no interesting themes, no interesting anything. You've just kind of got some neat visuals. It is so dull. It is so, so dull. I've sat through a lot of very long films, a lot of very, very long art films, and this felt like one of the longest experiences in a film I've ever had. Mainly due to the fact that the film holds on shots for so long with no dialogue, just characters sitting there. Why? I guess because it's artistic. It feels more autistic, but hey, I don't know. Throughout the film, I was getting really, really heavy Gaspino vibes. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Of course, he did Enter the Void, which I love in some regards. I think the film is about 2 hours too long. Also because it's nauseating, kind of like Beyond the Black Rainbow. But that film actually has a plot. Even though it's very, very loose, it's still really, really great. Visually fantastic. Kind of similar to this as well. I was getting kind of vibes from that where it has this like weird flickering transition effect out of every scene. The Gaspino uses it sparingly, but it's still like a stylistic element that he has. With this, it's just like, it's every single scene transitions out with this fucking flickering effect, and it's so irritating. It's actually like physically painful to watch this film. It hurts because it's so long and so dull and then so abrasive in parts. Like, it's got this kind of grainy effect on the film, like it's shot on VHS or something, but it's so grainy you can't really see what's happening, and it's just irritating to look at. Like, it crosses the border from, oh, that's an interesting stylistic aesthetic, to, no, that's just really bad. Like, you're just using shit film quality. Like, you've crossed the line, man. It's not good anymore. And there's even some weird, like, technical errors in this film. For some reason, like, half the shots are out of focus. Okay, half is an exaggeration, but there's a lot of shots where it's just like, it'll be out of focus, and then when you cut back, the shot's in focus. So it's like someone was halfway through the scene and they're all like tripping acid or something, like, man, this is like the fucking best film ever, and then someone's like, wait, we gotta like focus the camera, and they did it in the middle of the scene. So there's a bunch of shit out of focus, which is so weird. Like, the only time you should ever really be seeing something being out of focus is if you're shooting an on-the-run scene where, the cameraman's moving around a lot, or like an improv scene where characters are, moving, and the ring pull or whatever the fuck it's called doesn't have time to adjust the lens. But even so, that's not even excusable in those cases. It just makes sense. These are like shot reverse shot and it's out of focus. I don't know how that happens in a feature film with a budget. It's nuts. Now, I did say this film is extremely boring, but there are a few things that keep you interested. The actor for Mercurio, and I don't know what his name is, I don't fucking care, but he is terrible. And I think the term terrible does a disservice to how terrible his performance is. I mean, it's like beyond abysmal. It's actually mesmerizing how god-awful it is. And I'll show a few clips here.
Have you had any headaches?
Good night, Barry.
Good night, Rosemary. I am so sorry that you were never able to meet your mother. We do have a system in place. Yes, absolutely comprehensive. She was a very beautiful woman.
Like, this is how he acts for the entire film, from the beginning. And I'm like, oh, is this, like, some act he's putting on within the film as his character? No, this is just how he acts and talks all the time. Which also sucks, because he talks so slowly and so weirdly rhythmically. It's like, I kind of get what he's trying to do. Like, he's trying to play this, like, weird, really cold, robotic scientist character who's really disconnected or something. But it's like, it passes from, like, normal to experimental to beyond experimental to beyond experimental to beyond the black rainbow. Like, that's what it passes into. But it gets to that stage where it's like, am I even watching a performance anymore? Like, what is life? What's even happening? What the fuck? So yeah, hopefully you can see what I mean. I mean, maybe some people like it for how weird it is, and I kind of did like it in the beginning. I'm like, whoa, that's so strange. Then it just keeps going, and it's like, it feels like comedic acting. And I'm making a big point out of this because he's essentially the person in the film that has the most dialogue. He's kind of the main character almost, like the girl is also, but then she isn't really. I can see why people would like this. I can imagine people defending this avidly. That sort of shit happens when you have a film that is extremely on the end of ambiguous and really vague, that you'll get people who defend it and will say shit like, oh yeah, every single part of the film has meaning and it's all some stylistic, artistic masterpiece, because they think that because it is so inaccessible, that thus means that because it's inaccessible, that when you get to the depths of it, it's actually a brilliant masterpiece that no one understands, and you got to analyze it. I mean, it's pure style, and some of the style is nice. Like I was saying, some of the cinematography in this is amazing. Like, wow, that's really good, and that's the only reason I'm bumping the score up from what I would normally give it. This would probably be close to a 10. If it didn't have the visuals, it does, but obviously I won't reveal the score yet, but it's somewhat close to that, it's not very good at all. There's also, like, really, really abrupt, awkward scene changes, like a juxtaposition thing, and, a lot of films do that, and a lot of films do it really, really well, but this doesn't, and it overuses it, and I think that's the key word. It overuses each of its stylistic elements, like the flickering lights. Gaspar Noé uses that quite a bit in Irreversible and quite a bit in Enter the Void, but he doesn't use it for every single scene transition. And say like Tarantino might do a scene where it's like a build up a sound and then a sudden cut to quiet, but he doesn't do it every single scene. Like, this is every single scene is just this and this and this and this, and it's just a nightmare to watch. Like, everything is terrible to the point where it almost becomes a comedy. Like, halfway through the film, I'm like, is this whole thing like a joke? I don't get it. But then it just dips back into terrible again. Oh my god, Mercurio. I can't go on about how crazy shit Mercurio's acting is. It's mesmerizingly bad. It's like he's trying to play this kind of underplayed character, someone like Hannibal Lecter or something, where they're kind of this very cold but kind of hypnotic character who holds a lot of power in some way, like Hannibal Lecter's this kind of genius, essentially. Actually, funnily enough, this whole film is kind of like the first half of the third season of the TV show Hannibal, and that reference probably applies to about 7 people, and they're the 7 people who actually watched that, because it didn't do very well in the ratings, did it? It's actually a show that I really, really like. Season 1 and 2 are great. Second half of season 3 is decent, but the first half of the season is just incoherent artistic mess, just like this. Go check out Hannibal. Hannibal's a lot better than this shit. You don't want to be watching Beyond the Black Rainbow, believe me. Watch Hannibal instead. It's fantastic. Thank you. This film actually feels like they just had a cinematographer and everyone on set was tripping acid, and that's it. Like, that was the film. And you can have a lot of good films that are inspired by drugs. People do LSD and they want to make a good film out of it, But you don't make a film on acid. You don't make a film when you're extremely drunk, unless if you're making Things, which is a masterpiece, of course. Obviously, parts of this film are experimental, and I'm going to go into spoilers now, but obviously by the tone of this video, if you don't want to see the spoilers, know that I 100% would not recommend this film, ever. It is just a piece of shit. I hate it. Anyway, you've been warned. Spoilers are on now. Okay, so I get that it's being experimental in parts. Like, there's that whole part with, like, the white and black where it's, like, hyper exposed, and that's kind of neat, but it goes on for so long, and it's so dry. Like, that's the main thing. This film is just nothing. It's just so dry, just so stylistic. I mean, some of the music I really like there's one track that was really neat. I think if you watch the trailer, essentially, then you'll note that every single good shot in the film, and particularly that one song, the one song I like that's in the trailer, fantastic. This film has a fucking fantastic trailer, and that's one of the main reasons I watched it, also because the poster looked really nice. I saw some stills from it, and I'm like, wow, you know, I've heard of this, but not to the extent I should have. I looked at the ratings and they were kind of mixed, and I went, oh, okay, you know, some people don't really like artistic ventures, but I mean, wow, I'm like really opposed to this compared to some people. You know, I feel like some people would be quite lenient on this. They'd be giving it like, you know, 60s or 70s even. But for this one, I'm going 31. I mean, it's impossible to watch. And the only reason I'm bumping it up is because a lot of the stylistic stuff actually is pretty nice, but for a while before it gets extremely irritating. And the end of this film is just nuts. Like, not nuts in a good way. It just makes no sense. You know, nothing happens for an hour and 35. Like, this film is an hour 50, even though it feels like a 10 to 15 minute short experimental film that they've just stretched for fucking an hour 50. Like, a feature film has to be an hour and a half to be classified as a feature film. But this goes for an hour 50, which doesn't even mean that they were, you know, like stretching to, you know, get that hour 30 just so they could, you know, be classified as a feature film. No, they went 20 minutes over that, which means that someone really, really liked this, and they were very, very passionate about Beyond the Black Rainbow and its incredibly complex and deep story. Why does this film turn into a fucking slasher film at the end? It makes no fucking sense. It feels like it transitioned from experimental 80s synth pop weird ass film to like 80s retro slasher film. Like, you don't do both the genres at the same time. I guess if you're doing like an ode to the 80s, that kind of makes sense. But tonally it doesn't work. It goes from like so slow to I'm gonna be stabbing people now, hillbillies, and it's just like, what? It's like I'm watching a different film. It's like Mercurio got in the car in Beyond the Black Rainbow and fucking drove off into like a fucking another film for 15 minutes and then it just ended. I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's fucking mind-boggling. So obviously I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, I wouldn't even recommend to watch it as a comedy because it's so boring and so dry. And I mean, if you really just want to see anything from this film, listen to the soundtrack maybe, or just look at some stills from it and go, wow, there's some great shots in this film. But it's definitely not enough to outweigh how shit it is. It's like that. That's like the shit, and this is the good. You know, it's like drinking that shit, and it's like a little tiny little cup of ambrosia or something, you know. It's fucking trash. This film really pissed me off, but I'm actually kind of glad I saw this because I don't often get the chance to completely slam films and be very, very critical of them, which I actually prefer doing. Woe is me, I get to watch so many good foreign films. But hopefully, I think I'll try find a way to do this more, because I do like absolutely crushing people. I do like absolutely crushing and annihilating films. And I didn't even go very deep into this because it's not really even worth going into every single element of the film, because everything is shit. Like, there's so many mistakes and errors and fuck-ups, and it's just like, fuck it. It's not worth going over. You know, something that's worth like nitpicking over would be like the Star Wars prequels, because they have some sort of importance to like the original trilogy. This is just some fucking random art film. Like, who cares? You know, whatever. Anyway, that's it. I actually review other better films that you can watch, you know, actual good shit that I really, really like. You can find that on my channel. There'll be annotations after the credits of this video. And have a lovely day. God bless, my friends.